The jungle canopy of Cyrelia swayed in the humid breeze, casting dappled shadows across the research station where Dr. Jordan Cale meticulously cataloged his findings. For 6 months now, he'd lived alone at this remote outpost, studying the intricate web of life that flourished on this alien world. The war between humans and Trellians had ended 5 years ago, but the wounds remained fresh, and trust between species was still fragile at best. Jordan adjusted his field glasses, focusing on a peculiar symbiotic relationship between luminescent fungi and tree bark. His fingers danced across the holographic interface, recording data with the precision of a scientist who'd found solace in isolation. Out here, far from Earth Command's politics and the lingering tensions of interspecies diplomacy, he could lose himself in pure research. A rustling in the undergrowth caught his attention. Not the usual pattern of local fauna. Something larger, moving erratically. Jordan set down his equipment and moved cautiously toward the sound, his hand instinctively reaching for the emergency beacon at his belt. What he found made him freeze in disbelief. A small figure lay crumpled beneath a massive fern, breathing shallow and labored. At first glance, she could have been human, perhaps 6 or 7 years old. But the subtle blue tinge to her skin and the distinctive ridge patterns along her temples marked her as Trellian. Blood seeped from a gash on her leg, and her clothes were torn, suggesting she'd been running through the jungle for some time. Jordan's training kicked in. Whatever the political complications, a child was a child. He knelt beside her, speaking softly in the universal trade language. "Hey there, little one. My name is Jordan. I'm here to help." The girl's eyes fluttered open, revealing the characteristic violet irises of her species. Fear flashed across her face, but exhaustion won out. She whimpered something in Trellian that Jordan couldn't understand. "It's okay," he murmured, carefully examining her injuries. The leg wound was deep but clean. No signs of infection yet, but in this jungle, that could change quickly. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe." He lifted her gently, surprised by how light she felt. Trellian children, he'd read, had less dense bone structure than humans until adolescence. The girl's arms wrapped weakly around his neck as he carried her back to the station. Over the next 3 days, Jordan became both doctor and guardian. He cleaned and dressed her wounds, coaxed her to eat the nutrient paste that was safe for both species, and tried unsuccessfully to establish communication beyond basic gestures. The station's database confirmed what he'd suspected. No Trellian settlements were registered within 500 kilometers. How had this child ended up so far from her people? The girl gradually regained strength, watching Jordan with those striking violet eyes. She seemed particularly fascinated by his work, often pointing at his research screens with obvious curiosity. On the 3rd day, she surprised him by perfectly mimicking the gesture sequence he used to activate the holographic display. "Smart little thing, aren't you?" Jordan smiled, feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. He'd been alone for so long that even this wordless companionship felt precious. That night, exhausted from a day of foraging for foods the girl might recognize, Jordan fell into a deep sleep. When he woke at dawn, she was gone. The empty cot sent a spike of panic through him. He searched the station, the immediate perimeter, even ventured back to where he'd found her. Nothing. No tracks. No signs of struggle. She'd simply vanished as mysteriously as she'd appeared. Jordan tried to return to his work, but found himself constantly glancing at the door, expecting to see those violet eyes peering in. He'd grown attached, he realized with surprise. The station felt emptier than before. 3 days passed. Jordan mechanically went through his research routines, his mind elsewhere. On the 3rd evening, as the twin suns of Cyrelia painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, a firm knock echoed through the station. Jordan opened the door to find a Trellian woman standing tall and proud, her hand resting protectively on the shoulder of a familiar small figure. The child beamed up at him, chattering excitedly in her native tongue. The woman was striking, even by Trellian standards. Her skin held the same blue tinge as the child's, but with an iridescent quality that caught the fading light. Intricate tattoos spiraled along her arms, marking her as a warrior of significant rank. Her bearing spoke of strength and pride, but her eyes held something else entirely. "You are the one who saved my daughter," she said in accented but clear universal. It wasn't a question. Yes. I found her injured in the jungle. I'm Jordan Kale. I am Lyra of the Northern Winds clan. This is Yumi." She gestured to the child, who was practically bouncing with excitement. "By the ancient laws of my people, you have preserved the bloodline of our house. There is a debt that must be settled." Jordan shifted uncomfortably. "There's no debt. I just did what anyone would do." Lyra's expression hardened slightly. "Not anyone. You, an earthling, in these times of mistrust. You did not report her presence to your authorities. You did not seek reward or political advantage. You simply help." "Well, yes, but—" "Therefore," Lyra continued, her voice taking on a formal cadence, "by the traditions of my people, I offer you the highest honor our clan can bestow. You must become my husband and Yumi's father by law." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Jordan stared, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Marriage," Lyra clarified, as if explaining something perfectly reasonable. "You have shown yourself worthy by deed. The ritual can be performed within 3 days. But we don't even know each other. And I'm human, you're Trellian. The complications alone." "Complications?" Lyra's eyes flashed dangerously. "You think our offer is beneath you?" No, that's not what I meant at all. I'm just saying this is very sudden and—" "Sudden." Lyra stepped closer, and Jordan became acutely aware of her warrior's build, the subtle scars that marked her as a veteran of the recent conflict. "My daughter wandered for 2 days before you found her. She could have died. You saved her when your kind and mine are barely at peace. Such honor cannot go unacknowledged." Jordan ran a hand through his hair, desperately trying to find the right words. "I understand the honor you're offering, truly. But in my culture, marriage it's about love, compatibility. We don't even speak the same language fluently." "Love." Lyra tilted her head, considering. "Love can grow. Respect exists already. Is that not a foundation?" Before Jordan could respond, Yumi tugged at her mother's hand, speaking rapidly in Trellian. Lyra's expression softened as she listened, then hardened again as she turned back to Jordan. "My daughter says you were kind, that you sang to her when her fever spiked, that you did not know our lullabies, that you shared your food even when supplies were low. Are these not acts of love?" Jordan felt his cheeks warm. He had sung, awkwardly humming earth melodies when the girl thrashed in fevered dreams. It had seemed natural at the time. Look, I need to contact my supervisors. There are protocols." "Protocols." Lyra spat the word like a curse. "Yes, I know of Earth protocols. Forms and permissions and committees. While they debate, honor withers." She straightened, every inch the proud warrior. "I will give you time to consider. 3 days. But know this, Jordan Kale. Refusing this offer is not merely declining marriage. It is stating that my daughter's life, my clan's gratitude, means nothing to you." With that, she turned to leave. Yumi looked back, waving cheerfully, oblivious to the tension. As they disappeared into the jungle twilight, Jordan slumped against the doorframe. What had he gotten himself into? The next morning brought an unwelcome surprise. The communication array, his lifeline to Earth Command, displayed nothing but static. A massive electromagnetic storm in the upper atmosphere had descended overnight, cutting off all long-range transmissions. The timing felt almost cosmic in its irony. Jordan was still processing this development when Lyra appeared at his door, Yumi in tow and carrying what looked like camping supplies. "We will stay," she announced, pushing past his startled form. "The proper courtship period requires proximity." "Courtship? But I haven't agreed." "You haven't refused either." Lyra set down her pack with practiced efficiency. 3 days to decide. We will use them wisely. And so began the strangest period of Jordan's life. His orderly research station became a crossroads of 2 cultures, 2 species trying to navigate the space between honor and pragmatism, tradition and confusion. Lyra proved to be far more complex than her warrior's bearing suggested. She observed his research with intelligent questions, her scientific curiosity matching his own. She prepared meals with ingredients foraged from the jungle, sharing stories of each plant's significance in Trellian culture. In the evenings, she would clean her weapons with meditative precision while Yumi played with Jordan's less dangerous research equipment. "Your government will not approve," Lyra said on the second day, not looking up from the blade she was sharpening. "They fear mixing of our kinds." Jordan paused in his data entry. "Is that why you're really here? Some form of political protest?" For the first time, he saw uncertainty flicker across her features. "No, I came because honor demanded it, but I do not pretend ignorance of the greater implications." She set down the blade, meeting his gaze. "My husband died in the war, killed by human weapons. Many in my clan said I should let Yumi die rather than accept help from your kind." The weight of her words settled between them. Jordan thought of the small girl, now drawing pictures with his stylus, oblivious to the history of violence that separated their peoples. "Why didn't you?" Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "Because hatred is exhausting. Because my daughter deserves a future not poisoned by the past. Because you looked at her and saw only a child in need, not an enemy's offspring." That night, as Jordan lay on his cot listening to the rhythmic breathing of his unexpected guests, he found his clinical detachment crumbling. Lyra had offered him not just marriage, but a bridge between worlds. The researcher in him was fascinated by the cultural implications, but the man in him was terrified of the responsibility. On the third day, nature itself seemed determined to force a decision. Jordan woke to an ominous rumbling. The jungle, usually alive with countless sounds, had gone eerily silent. "Earth tremor?" he muttered, checking his instruments. The seismic readings were confusing, showing not the typical patterns of tectonic activity, but something more localized and rhythmic. Lyra appeared beside him, her warrior instincts clearly on high alert. "Not earth tremor. Migration." "Migration? Of what?" His answer came in the form of a living tsunami. Massive creatures burst from the jungle, hexapodal beasts the size of earth elephants but covered in chitinous armor. Jordan had studied them from afar, knew them as generally peaceful herbivores. But something had spooked the entire herd into a stampede directly toward the station. "The building won't hold," Jordan shouted over the growing thunder of feet. "We need to evacuate." They grabbed essential supplies and ran. Yumi clutched in Lyra's arms. Behind them, the research station disappeared beneath a tide of panicked creatures. Jordan led them to higher ground, a rocky outcropping he'd used for observations. But the stampede had triggered something worse. The ground beneath them groaned and shifted. Centuries of erosion had created a network of underground caverns, and the combined weight and vibration of the herd was causing a massive collapse. "The ridge is giving way." Lyra pointed to spreading cracks in the stone. Jordan looked around desperately. They were trapped between the stampede below and unstable ground above. Then he spotted it, a narrow ledge leading to a more stable formation. But getting there meant crossing a widening chasm. This way, he grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her toward the ledge. They moved carefully, the ground trembling beneath their feet. They were almost across when a sharp crack split the air. "Mama!" Yumi's scream pierced through the chaos. The child had slipped, sliding toward a growing fissure in the rock. Jordan didn't think. He dove forward, his fingers catching Yumi's wrist just as she went over the edge. The momentum carried him forward, and suddenly he was hanging half over the chasm, Yumi's weight threatening to pull them both into the darkness below. "Jordan!" Lyra's voice was raw with fear. "Take her!" he gritted out, muscles straining. With enormous effort, he swung Yumi up toward her mother. Lyra caught her daughter, pulling her to safety. But the movement cost Jordan his precarious balance. The edge crumbled beneath him, and he felt himself falling. In that moment, time seemed to slow. He saw Lyra's face contort with an emotion he couldn't name, her hand reaching out futilely. Then his shoulder slammed into a protruding root, jerking him to a painful stop. He hung there, winded and battered, listening to the chaos gradually subside as the herd passed. "Jordan, hold on." Lyra's voice came from above. He looked up to see her fashioning a rope from the climbing vines he'd cataloged weeks ago. Of course, a warrior wouldn't know which plants could hold weight. Working together, they managed to pull him up. He collapsed on solid ground, breathing heavily, his body a collection of bruises and scrapes. Yumi flung herself at him, sobbing words he didn't understand, but whose meaning was clear. Lyra knelt beside them, her composure finally cracking. "You stupid, brave, impossible human," she whispered, her hand touching his face with surprising gentleness. "You could have died. Couldn't let her fall," Jordan managed, wincing as he sat up. "Not again." "Again." Lyra frowned, then understanding dawned. "You were not just saving Yumi. You were saving someone else too. Someone from your past." Jordan looked away. "My sister. Years ago. Climbing accident. I was too slow, too afraid. She fell. Survived, but paralyzed. I became a researcher instead of the doctor I planned to be. Chose isolation over the risk of failing someone again." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "And yet when the moment came, you did not hesitate. You have been hiding from connection, Jordan Cale. But your heart knows better than your fear. The emergency passed, but their situation remained precarious. The station was destroyed, buried under tons of debris. The communication array was beyond salvage. They made camp in a sheltered cave, pooling their supplies and skills to create a temporary home. As night fell, Lyra built a fire while Jordan tended to their various injuries. Yumi had fallen asleep between them, exhausted by the day's terror. "Your refusal," Lyra said quietly, staring into the flames. "I understand it better now. You fear responsibility because you have felt its weight. But, Jordan, today you chose. Not from obligation or honor codes, but from your heart. You chose yes." Jordan looked at the sleeping child, then at the woman who had crashed into his orderly life with demands of marriage and talks of honor. Somewhere in the past days, his perspective had shifted. This wasn't about tradition or politics anymore. It was about connection, about choosing to be more than the sum of their fears and prejudices. "I did," he admitted. "But Lyra, the complications haven't gone away. Your people, my people, they won't accept this easily. Since when has anything worthwhile been easy?" She smiled, the expression transforming her warrior's features. "Besides, you still have not answered my proposal. Will you let bureaucrats and distance decide our fate? Or will you choose?" Jordan thought about his isolated life, the safety of studying connection without risking it. Then he looked at Yumi's small hand curled trustingly around his finger, at Lyra's eyes reflecting firelight and possibility. "Yes," he said simply, "but I have a condition." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "We do this right. Not just your traditions or mine, but something new. Something ours." Her smile widened. "Agreed." 3 days later, when a rescue shuttle finally detected their emergency beacon, the crew found an intact, if unusually mixed family. The pilot, a grizzled veteran of human-Tyrellian joint operations, shook his head in amazement. "Dr. Cale, Earth Command is livid. You were supposed to maintain professional distance. There are 17 different protocols you violated, not to mention the diplomatic nightmare of this." He gestured at Lyra and Yumi. "I'm aware," Jordan replied calmly. "I'm submitting my resignation." "You're what now?" "Resignation. I'm accepting a position as cultural liaison for the Northern Winds clan. It comes with housing, family benefits, and significantly less paperwork." The pilot stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. Behind him, other crew members whispered among themselves. A human choosing to live among Trellians was unheard of. A formal clan adoption was unprecedented. Word of the unusual arrangement spread quickly. By the time they reached the nearest spaceport, a small crowd had gathered. Trellian elders stood beside Earth diplomats, all wearing expressions of barely contained outrage. An Earth Command general pushed to the front. "Dr. Cale, this is highly irregular. You can't simply abandon your post to play house with." "With my family?" Jordan interrupted quietly. "General, I spent 6 months cataloging connections between species, studying how different organisms could coexist. Turns out I was doing everything but living it. A Trellian elder, his skin weathered by age and conflict, stepped forward. This human saved a child of the clans. He has earned his place, if he has the courage to claim it. The crowd parted as more Trellians arrived, members of Lyra's clan. They formed a protective circle around the small family, their meaning clear. This was no longer just about politics or protocol. It was about choice, acceptance, and the bridges that could be built when fear gave way to understanding. Months later, Jordan stood in the rebuilt research station, now expanded to accommodate both human and Trellian scientists. The work continued, but with a new focus, understanding not just biological connections, but cultural ones as well. Yumi ran past, chasing a harmless bioluminescent insect, switching effortlessly between Earth Standard and Trellian as she described her discovery. Lyra looked up from her own research terminal, where she was documenting traditional ecological knowledge that had never been properly recorded. "Second thoughts?" she asked, noticing his contemplative mood. Jordan smiled, pulling her close. "Never. Though I do sometimes wonder how different things might have been if I hadn't taken that walk in the jungle. Then you would still be alone, convinced that isolation was safety." She touched the marriage band he wore, a fusion of earth metals and Trellian crystal. "And I would still believe that honoring the past meant prolonging its hatred." Outside, a new monument stood where the jungle met the research station, a representation of two hands clasped, one human, one Trellian, with a child's handprint bridging them both. It had become something of a pilgrimage site, a symbol that connection was possible even across the deepest divides. Jordan often found himself standing before it, especially on quiet mornings when mist rose from the jungle canopy. He'd think about the frightened child he'd found, the warrior who demanded marriage, and the family they'd chosen to become. A small hand slipped into his. Yumi looked up at him with those violet eyes that had first captured his heart. "Papa," she said in the perfect hybrid accent that marked children of two worlds, "tell me again about the day we found each other." Jordan lifted her onto his shoulders, feeling Lyra's presence beside him. "Well, little one, it started with a very stubborn man who thought he was better off alone." As he told the story, embellished with each retelling, Jordan marveled at how wrong he'd been. He'd thought he was saving a lost child. Instead, she had saved him, bringing with her a love that transcended species and a family that defied all conventional wisdom. In the distance, Earth ships landed alongside Trellian vessels at the expanded spaceport. Mixed crews worked together on projects that would have been impossible just years before. Change was slow, sometimes painful, but it was happening. And it had started with something as simple as choosing to help, to trust, to love. Jordan smiled as Yumi laughed at his theatrical retelling. He'd spent his career studying connections. Now he was living them. And really, wasn't that the point all along? The years passed like pages in a well-loved book. The research station grew into a small settlement, a beacon of interspecies cooperation. Jordan published papers that revolutionized understanding of Cyrelian ecology, but his greatest work was never submitted to any journal. It lived in the shared meals, the blended traditions, the children who grew up seeing difference as a gift rather than a threat. Lyra became a bridge between worlds, her warrior's strength tempered by compassion. She taught human scientists the subtle languages of the jungle, while learning from them the intricate dance of diplomacy. Together, she and Jordan wrote new rules for a new kind of family. Yumi flourished, becoming fluent in both cultures, neither fully human nor fully Trellian, but something wonderfully her own. She led the first mixed youth expedition into uncharted regions of Cyrelia, her laughter echoing through alien forests as she made discoveries that would have been impossible for someone limited to a single worldview. On quiet evenings, when the twin suns painted the sky in impossible colors, Jordan would sit with his chosen family and marvel at the journey. From isolation to connection, from fear to trust, from saving a life to building a future. Sometimes love comes knocking in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes it demands marriage before the first conversation. Sometimes it speaks in languages you don't understand, through traditions that seem impossible. But sometimes, if you're brave enough to say yes, it leads you home. I saved a little girl. Jordan would often tell visitors, both human and Trellian, who came to see the miracle of their blended settlement. Then he'd smile, his arm around Lyra, watching Yumi teach a mixed class of children how to read the jungle's secrets. I never imagined she'd save me right back. And in those words lay a truth greater than any scientific discovery, that the bridges we build between hearts are the strongest structures in any universe, that family is chosen as much as it's born, and that sometimes the greatest adventure isn't in the stars above, but in the connections we forge right here, on whatever ground we stand. The monument in the jungle grew weathered with time, but its message only grew stronger. Two species, two hearts, two cultures, united by the simplest and most powerful force in existence, the choice to love, despite everything that says we shouldn't. In the end, that choice changed not just 3 lives, but the fate of 2 civilizations learning, finally, to see each other as family. And it all started with a little girl lost in the jungle and a lonely man who chose to help. Love, after all, has always been the most revolutionary act of all.